Well, let's stand to honor the reading of God's Word. Day of Pentecost, 50 days from the resurrection Sunday when the power of the Holy Spirit fell in the room. But this week, ironically enough, is 40 days from the resurrection, and this is Ascension Week. I think Thursday was Ascension Day, which people celebrate Christ being taken up into heaven, especially in Europe. It happens a lot, but we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit this morning. Forgive my voice. I think I've lost it like in worship and the altars of first service. And man, His glory is thick today. Acts chapter 1, verses 3 through 8, continuing the series Flourish. Pastor and Becky, they are on the Big Island in Hawaii right now ministering with Jacob and Leah Barrientos, our former staff members here, and they're at King's Kona there. So if the Lord be with them, they'll be starting their service in about an hour. I think they're 5 hours behind us. But here we go. Acts chapter 1, verse 3. After his sufferings, Jesus showed himself to these men and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. He appeared to them over a period of 40 days and spoke about the kingdom of God. On one occasion, while he was eating with them, he gave them this command: do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father promised, which you have heard me speak about. For John baptized with water, but in a few days you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit. So when they met together, they didn't ask him about the Holy Spirit. They didn't ask him about the things he'd been talking about. They asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? On their mind, they had, what's he going to do for our nation, our lives right now? He said to them, it is not for you to know the times or the dates the Father has set by his own authority. And then verse 8, very familiar passage verse. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. And you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And this, Trinity Church, is God's word. Have you ever been disappointed, discouraged? I mean, Jesus gives these historic, powerful words, and he says, you're going to get all this stuff. And as he gives the words, all of a sudden, he's immediately from the Mount of Olives there, just outside of Jerusalem, he's taken up into heaven. And they're standing there looking at him. And then the angels come and go, why are you looking at Jesus? The same way you saw him leave, he's going to come back again someday. But you got to think about it from their perspective for a moment, because he was the Messiah, he was the Savior, he was the one who had defeated death, hell, and the grave. And he's gone. And except for John on the Isle of Patmos about 50 years later, none of the disciples will ever see Jesus face to face again on this earth. And there's got to be a feeling of loss, disappointment, unknown. I was thinking about last year, Labor Day weekend. We were getting ready to celebrate my son's birthday, and a group of his friends and our friends, Pastor Danny and Jeff Calvary and Luke and Jude, we were going to Florida to Bay Hill Country Club, Golf Club, just in Orlando, and we were going to play 3 or 4 days at one of the most exclusive, really nice golf resorts, in the country, where Arnold Palmer, had his tournament. It was a great moment. You're looking forward to it. COVID had kind of locked us down for a long time. Florida was open, and we were heading that way. But on Friday night, we went to a Trinity Christian School football game in San Antonio, playing Cornerstone. Rode down with my brother-in-law, John Michael. Played golf that afternoon, went to eat Mexican food, went to the game that night. In the morning, Michelle had come down to watch the game, so I was riding back with Michelle. I'm getting to Austin, back toward Dallas, and John Michael calls me from his car, and he says, I'm not feeling very well. I think I'm going to get tested, rapid tested in Austin. Oh, great. So by the time we get just outside of the suburbs of Dallas, almost home, Joe Michael calls and he says, I'm positive. 5 hours in the car the next day, so I began quarantining that afternoon. I didn't come to church on Sunday morning. Sunday afternoon, I started feeling like body aches and stuff of that nature. And when I woke up Monday morning, I could tell I was off, a little bit of slight fever. And then I went to get the little rapid test, and the little thing came back, and I was positive. Now, this was discouraging, depressing, and despair at so many different levels I can't even describe. We were leaving for Florida the next day. I mean, several $1,000s we'd spent, the fun, the excitement, and not to mention all that, all of my friends and family had left without me. They went anyway. I mean, I'm locked in a room. I'm back in our bedroom. Michelle will drop the food and then just run because she doesn't want to get COVID. I mean, I'm alone. I'm isolated. I'm disappointed that I'm missing this trip. But then all of a sudden, Monday night, I start feeling a little worse. And by Tuesday, I mean, my symptoms as a whole were very mild and really quick, 2 or 3 days. But Monday night into Tuesday was really challenging. And on Tuesday night, when it was the worst for me, never had any breathing issues, but just the whole fog, a presence came into my room. An enemy, an intimidating presence. And it just sat down and hung out. And it wouldn't leave. I mean, I'm a pastor. I know the word. I really don't deal with fear and those kind of things, except maybe snakes or lightning, those two things. And I quoted scripture, and I sang worship songs, but nothing changed. And again, I'm there by myself in the middle of the night. And I'm confronted for really on the second time in my life, an intimidating and an isolating spirit. Kind of like the spirit, I call it the spirit of Nebuchadnezzar, who looked at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and said, what God can save you out of my hand? You know, that spirit walked into my room. I was thinking about this again. The last 14 months of our nation and the world, the fear, the isolation, the uncertainty of an unknown future, the disappointments of our daily lives, and regardless of what your opinion is about the coronavirus or COVID and whatever has happened, I can say this, there have been close to 600,000 deaths, people that have died, and almost every one of them have died alone. They've died isolated from their family. We've got a situation, in the house, really close friends of our, involved in our church, members of our church, and the husband is in the hospital right now fighting for his life with COVID, and nobody can go in and see him. He's there by himself fighting a battle, a physical and spiritual battle, all by himself. But it's not just that, because the daily situations of our lives didn't change. Relational heartbreaks, a prodigal son, daughter, grandchild, financial situation, the loss of a job, or your business didn't work out the way you thought it might, another health crisis, cancer, heart issue. Maybe the politician you wanted didn't work out the way. It's disappointment. And if we look at the disciples here in Acts chapter 1, they're looking at Jesus as he's standing in front of them. They don't know he's about to ascend into heaven. They ask the question, Lord, are you at this time? Are you gonna restore everything that's been taken from me? When will my life return to the promised glory? Yeah, I'm telling you today, the glory of God is so thick here that in the first service, I could barely stand up and preach. It's thickness. But at the same time, you may be asking, I don't really want a spiritual glory, Tim. I want a personal, a physical, the things I've been hoping and dreaming for. And the disciples are asking, when's my life going to return to its promised glory? And that's my question today. How do we flourish? How do we prosper? How do we thrive when disappointment comes our way? Because like us, the disciples, they had plans for their future. It's the reasons they started following Jesus in the first place. And can I tell you that the 4 Gospels reveal that every one of the disciples had a strong political view of the kingdom. And they were specifically concerned about their own position and their privileges inside the kingdom. If you don't believe me, you just take a walk through the Gospels, because throughout the Scriptures, they are arguing among themselves over who's going to be the greatest. I mean, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John in Luke chapter 9 up on the Mount of Transfiguration. Moses and Elijah show up. There's a glory of God. Jesus shines like this bright, white, shining thing that we can't even really describe it in the natural. Peter wants to live there. Jesus goes, no, we got to go down. They go down the mountain. There's a demon-possessed boy with a father, and Jesus rebukes the demon-possessed boy who's been that way since you. I mean, the power, the miracles have broken out. The disciples should be basking in that glory. But as they walk along the road leaving, Luke 9:46 says, a fight broke out among them on who was going to be the greatest. I'm better than you. I'm a better preacher than you. I'm a better speaker than you. Jesus loves me more than he loves you. I mean, he took us up on the mountain, didn't take you up on the mountain. Life is the same. And then if you go into right before the Passion Week, we learn also that mothers have never changed. Because James and John's mom, her adult children, she goes up to Jesus and kneels before him and says, Jesus, I need a favor for my boys. They can't do it for themselves. They don't work hard enough, I know, but I need you to do me a favor. And can you have one of them sit on your right hand and the other sit on your left in the kingdom? And what they were saying is, can John be your chief of staff? And can James be the secretary of defense? I mean, she's asking for real positions. And then the night of the Passover. Remember a couple weeks ago, we had that incredible Passover communion here in the service, and it breaks out, and the pastor's shouting, the words in the communion. The night of the holy Passover. What are they doing as part of their evening? They're arguing. Luke 22:24. They're arguing over who's going to be the greatest. What were their hopes and what were their dreams? We want the Romans out of our lives. And we want our nation returned to its former glory like it was in the days of David and the days of Solomon. That's why, and when they met Jesus on the Mount of Olives, 40 days after the resurrection here in Acts chapter 1, that's what they were anxiously awaiting. Their conquering Messiah to fulfill the expectations of all their hopes and dreams. They'd waited their whole lives for this moment. But Jesus disappointed them. There would be no defeat of the Roman Empire, not for another 450 years. There would be no restoration of a free, sovereign nation of Israel, not for another 1,948 years. If you know poetry, there's a great poet from Scotland. It's called Robert Burns from the 1700s, but poets don't make a lot of money generally until they die, and it's too late. So he was a farmer. So one day he's outside of his house and he's plowing his field, and he's got his plow and he plows over a nest of a mouse. And he looks down at the nest, and it was intricate and elaborate, and he began to feel bad for the mouse because he had destroyed its life work, its life dreams, and all the things that the mouse had done. And so he went back to his farmhouse and he sat down and he wrote a poem to the mouse. And the poem is actually called To a Mouse. The famous line says this: "But mouse, you are not alone. Improving foresight may be vain. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry and leave us nothing but grief and pain." What do we do when our life is plowed up by some unknown force? What do we do when our best laid plans don't go the way we thought they should go? What do you do when a really, really close friend who you've broken bread with and you spent your life with breaks your heart and you feel like he's put a knife in your back? That's a personal illustration from the last 12 days. How do you deal with the disappointment? And disappointment leads to despair. Despair leads to loneliness. Loneliness leads to bitterness. All these things head you in places that are not kingdom-minded. And that's what the disciples are confronted with right there in the Mount of Olives when Jesus says, "Hey guys, I'm gone. The kingdom's not going to be what you think." And so he gives us a little outline. He gives the disciples an outline of how to flourish. The first one is fun. You'll love it. He gives you what your position is. Now, in the first service, somebody goes, "Yes." I went, don't get really excited, because what he's telling the disciples is double-edged. He says, here's the good news of the kingdom. You're going to take the good news to the ends of the earth, and you're going to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And they're thinking about their own nation. And in verse 6, they ask him, "Lord, when are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" Translation: Jesus, when are you going to restore all of our hopes and dreams? Jesus looks at them and he goes, "It is not for you to know the times or the dates the Father is set by his own authority." Jesus translation, okay, guys, it's none of your business. What do you mean it's none of my business? What he's telling them is this decision is above your pay grade. It's like my dad looking at me and going, hey, son, last time I checked, no one died and made you the boss. Look, our position in the kingdom is a servant. Servants do what they're told. Servants are not CEO visionary leaders. Servants do the menial labor. You know, the first step to understanding how to flourish, how to thrive when disappointment comes is you got to understand your position in the kingdom of God. And I'm not talking about when the enemy comes your way. Because when the enemy comes your way, you are a royal priesthood. You are a chosen nation. You are a people who belong to God. When the enemy comes your way, you remind him that you have the keys to the kingdom and you have all authority and he's under your feet. But when you're around Jesus, you're just the servant. What I love about him, though, is even though there's always this breaking out over who's the greatest, Jesus never rebukes the disciples about their pursuit of earthly things. He just gives them the outline of how to accomplish and be the greatest. So how do you become great? By understanding your position. Be a servant. How do you become great? Be last. Look at what it says in Mark 9:35. If you want to be first, you've got to be last. How do you become great? Be like a child. Matthew 18:4. Whoever becomes like a child is greatest in the kingdom. These how do you get it? I mean, who's the most famous preacher in the world today? I don't know. I mean, I could list a few names, you know. But imagine back in Jesus' day, the most famous preacher in the world was John the Baptist. I mean, the disciples are coming to him. They're all flowing to him. He's got the most YouTube followers. He's getting everything's coming his way. And then one day he meets his cousin. He baptizes his cousin. And then in John 3:30, he says, whoever wants to become, last, I've got to become lesser. And Jesus has got to become greater. He voluntarily just steps out of the way so someone else can have the most YouTube followers. That's how you work in the kingdom. It's safe to understand the kingdom. And when you get into the child thing, I have a child that's moved into my life. He's 7 months old. His name is Caspian. For those of you who don't read, that's Prince Caspian from the Chronicles of Narnia. And his mother is what I can't say that. She's very restrictive in what he's allowed to do for fun. Like you can't give him any candy or cookies or ice cream because then he wants more and she can't stop him. Then he starts crying and you can't give him a drink, and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Well, sometimes though, she leaves him alone with me. We were on vacation, a few weeks ago, and so I don't know where she went, but Michelle and I had him. We took him across from our condo there, and we were in the little marketplace, and there was a Hawaiian shaved ice place there, and it was amazing. They put ice cream at the bottom. You put on the little, however they make that Hawaiian shaved ice, I don't know. And they put the pineapple juice and the coconut juice and the banana juice on top. And as I'm taking a bite, Caspian's having a really rough time that he's not getting to partake. And I'm thinking, his mom's not here. And so he took most of my big thing. And as he's eating that, the juice is dripping down his face. You would have thought I'd handed him the keys to a new Ferrari. It's probably the greatest 30 minutes of his life at 7.5 months old. And I thought to myself as I'm watching him eat that, have I lost the joy of a really, really good snow cone? And every time when I come into the presence of God, have I become desensitized to the majesty, the beauty, the marvelous taste of the kingdom of God? And unless you're continually reminded of coming into the kingdom like a little child, You can't have all that you believe God has promised you to have. That's what our position is. That's how we understand our position. Servant, last, childlike. And while I'm in Hawaii, I am the first guest speaker that's going to be at King's Kona there in King's Kona on the Big Island. I'm supposed to be speaking. They've been there 7 months. They've gone from 30 or 40 people to about 300 or 400. God is exploding, and I'm pretty excited. At 8 a.m., 10 a.m., pastor is probably getting ready to preach in 50 minutes right now in that very service. And on Friday, before the sermon, on Sunday, Pastor Jacob calls me on the phone, and he goes, "Hey, Tim, I need to talk to you." I go, "What?" He goes, "I'm going to have to bump you." I said, "Bump me? I was your boss when you were on staff here. How can you bump me?" I mean, we're friends. And he goes, "Well," he goes, "My boss just called me, Dr. Morocco, who's over the Kona churches there on all the islands of Hawaii. And his boss just called him from the General Superintendent of the Assemblies of God, and they want the Assistant General Superintendent of the Assemblies of God to preach on Sunday in your church. And so I'm going to have to let him preach, and you're going to have to, not preach. I'll move you to Tuesday night when no one comes." He didn't say that, but that's what I'm thinking. And we generally don't go to, I generally miss for vacation maybe one Sunday, sometimes 2 a year. So I generally don't go to physical church on Sundays when I'm on vacation. But that Saturday afternoon, after I'd been kicked out and put down into the low parts of life as a little meaningless pastor, and I felt the Lord say, "You need to go to church tomorrow, the 8 a.m. service." I go, "I don't want to waste half my..." You ever argue with God? I do. I don't want to waste half my day on the Big Island of Hawaii, go and just sit and listen to a sermon. Just honor the church, you need to go. Okay. I got there, I stepped into a building that holds about 200, maybe big as this stage. I walked into the building, and God met me in a way during that 30-minute worship service especially. And the worship was good, but it wasn't what we have here. But God met me in a way that I can't even describe it to you. Like I haven't felt in it more than a decade. And I would have missed that if I'd not understood my position. That I'm not some big shot. I'm in the kingdom. I do what I'm told. And the second thing you got to know is not just your position, it's perseverance. He says in verse 4 of Acts chapter 1, "Do not leave Jerusalem, but wait." Wait means hang on, tarry, be patient. And these are all words and phrases that really seem similar, but yet when you're in the middle of a crisis, when you're in the middle of something that's come your way and you've been disappointed, and when God says, "I'm sorry, I just need you to wait." Jesus is gone. They do not know that in 10 days, the Holy Spirit is going to fall. They just know that he promised the Holy Spirit, and they know that he said, "If you'll just wait, I'll send him." I don't know. It's not maybe tomorrow. It might be 5 days. It might be 5 months. It might be 5 years. And that's not, just again, in worship 2 weeks ago, text from my dad that my mom was being rushed to the hospital in East Texas. And so I'm thinking, my dad thinks at that moment she's had a stroke. And I'm getting ready. I'm going to go get in the car. I'm going to tell Pastor I'm going to leave. I'm going to drive. I'm going to be with my dad, try to get in there to see my mom. And all of a sudden, I hear the Lord during worship, middle of worship, first service, just say, "Wait." And so I just worshiped. The weight didn't leave. Went to the second service. I just worshiped. I couldn't focus on what was going on. I don't even know what Pastor preached that day. But I waited. And by the end of the service, they'd gotten her there, and after 24 hours of her being unresponsive and stroke-like symptoms, all of a sudden everything was just gone. They don't know why, but it was just different. See, the waiting, the disciples, 3 years they had traveled with Jesus. They were rock stars. They were royalty. But then there's the arrest, there's the trial, there's the crucifixion. All their dreams are gone. But then he's resurrected Sunday, renewed hope. For 40 days, he's in and out of their lives. He's hanging out with them. He's doing miracles again. He's talking to them. Their kingdom hopes are restored. They're going to be more powerful than Caesar, than Pilate, than the president, than the world leader. They're going to be it. And he says, no, that's not going to happen. Go wait. Everything's pointing in one direction, and then Jesus says, no, it's not going to work out that way. Do it this way instead. Abraham and Sarah, God's going to make you a great nation. You're going to have a child. Waited 25 years. David, Samuel anoints him with oil at 15 years old. Teenagers, young adults, listen to me. You're in your services on Monday nights, on Wednesday nights, you're going to get promises. You're going to get downloads from the Holy Spirit. You're in camp. God's going to pour out your spirit in a way. You're going to get the anointing oil is going to come on your head, and David is going to be the next king of Israel. But no one's handing him a book at 15 years old when he gets that anointing from Samuel that says, oh, wait, you're going to be chased by spears and run in the desert, and you're not really ever going to get to be king until you're 30. It's a theme. Naomi, she has to go from Bethlehem into Moab, because of the famine with her husband and her sons, and her husband dies while they're there. Her two sons die while she's there. For 10 years, she's in a wilderness, a spiritual and a physical wilderness. She's a widow. She's poverty. They have to move back to Bethlehem, and they have to beg for food. Because she has a daughter-in-law named Ruth. And Ruth's perseverance resurrects and rescues Naomi's. And after 10 years, God brings Boaz and Ruth together, and everything is restored. My favorite story in the Bible is Joseph. 17, God gives him a dream. You're going to be a great ruler. And his brothers don't like that. They hate him. They throw him into a pit. They sell him into slavery. But Joseph flourished in slavery. You realize that? Where he was, unjustly accused, all the things that happened to him, he flourished. And Potiphar in his house, everything's going great, but his Potiphar's wife likes Joseph, and she every day she chased after him and said, hey, come to bed with me every day, because he was well-built and handsome, the Bible says. And so ultimately she accuses him of rape. He gets thrown into prison after being elevated. Okay, I'm heading, life's kind of okay, not what I thought, but I'm good. And then all of a sudden he's back at the bottom again, he's in prison. But in prison, he flourishes. Everything he touches turns to gold. The prison warden puts him in charge of everything. And at 28 years old, 11 years after he has started this journey of God depositing within him a hope and a dream, a cupbearer and a baker walk into his presence, into his prison. And they have dreams, and Joseph interprets their dreams. The baker's dream is not so good. He's going to get executed. The cupbearer's dream is going to be back, elevated position, back to Pharaoh. And Joseph looks at him in Genesis 40, verse 14, and he says, when you go back to Pharaoh, remember me. Tell him about me, because I've done nothing to be here in this prison. And the verse 23 of it, Genesis 40, probably the most depressing verse in all the Bible. The chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. And then the next verse, verse 1 of chapter 41, when 2 full years had passed. 30 years old, perseverance. He waited. He never lost his relationship with the Lord. He never lost what God had called him to do in the midst of everything that happened to him. And can I tell you that 10 years ago, God began to say, we began to say, God, pour out your spirit on our sons and our daughters. Begin to prophesy that, begin to speak that into the wind, begin to speak that into the atmosphere. And Danny and Paul and Kami and Gabe and Laura, your faithfulness in this house over the last decade is a result of God pouring out his spirit right now and what God is doing in this place. Because you come on a Monday night, you come on a Wednesday night, you will see the manifold presence of God showing up in this house. But it didn't happen like this. It happened because people waited. I mean, Laura shared, last week before, you're sharing how much prayer they put in just for the young adults. Your position, your perseverance, and finally the good news. Worship team, if you'll come. How do you deal with disappointment? The best news that Jesus gives them, he goes, you're going to get power. He knew his words about the kingdom are going to disappoint them. But he says, if you'll wait, you're going to receive something better than you've ever imagined. You're going to receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, a dynamite, a dunamis. That the same power that raised Christ from the dead is going to quicken your mortal body. It's going to be available to you individually. In the midst of your depression, in the midst of your night terrors, in the midst of your medical crisis, in the midst of your broken dreams, in the midst of your financial devastation, there is a power that is available to you. But you have to wait on it. You have to wait for it. But it's there. And once you have it, then like the disciples, once they waited, once the day of Pentecost came and once it fell, then they no longer ran in fear from the Roman or the religious authorities. Now they stood up with courage. They no longer were unschooled, uneducated men, but they spoke with authority, and all the leaders would go, where do these guys go to school? They no longer walked powerless, but they began to heal the sick. They began to raise the dead. They began to prophesy. And Peter prophesied that God was going to pour out the Spirit on all generations and all young people. Oppression, opposition, disappointment didn't stop for them. That was all still going to come. But what changed was what they had inside. So he goes, going back to COVID for me, the enemy in my room. Five months before that, the first week that everything shut down, God woke me up and he'd given me a word about all the COVID stuff. I wrote it down. So when the enemy wouldn't leave that night in September, I got my iPad and I pulled up the word God had given me. And so, I wasn't very, again, my temperature was, only about 99.5, but just the weird fog that comes into your brain and with it and, the physical aches in your body, it was just, again, for me, really mild. But it was intense, but I began to read this again. And I'm going to read it to you this morning. I sleep well. This is my dream from March of 2020 that I was reading in September of 2020 when I was facing an enemy. I sleep well and I almost never dream, or at least dreams that I remember. Tonight I had a dream and I remember it. I was in church. Someone comes to me and says, do you know Dennis Erickson? I said, the Miami Hurricanes football coach from the 1980s? It's actually a person. There's something wrong with him, he said, and we rushed over to him in his chair. He's a large man, and he's slumped over in his chair, and he's deathly white. He appears dead, and I'm thinking to myself, he's dead. Another person near me in church cries out, he's dead. But then his eyes open, and he stands up slowly. He looks at me, and he roars. Really scary-like, with a voice and eyes that seem to peer into my soul. Immediately, I wake up. I'm not really afraid. I don't know. Maybe I am afraid. But I'm startled, and I'm now wide awake at 2:30 in the morning. Oddly enough, I start singing in my head. One of the benefits of listening to worship music all the time. I start singing, we'll listen to the power of sound on my lips. Jesus has broken the curse. He has never lost a battle. I was filled with peace, and it was at that moment I heard the Lord say to my spirit, speak to that demonic spirit. Okay, I said, I'll do it in the morning. Besides, who am I speaking to and what am I supposed to say? But that March, I couldn't sleep. God was impressing on me as I lay there that the man in my dreams was trying to destroy the church, and then I needed to speak to that demonic authority with demonic power with his authority. So I'm doing something I've never done before. I'm grabbing my iPad at 3 a.m. I'm getting prepared to speak with a spiritual authority against some unknown power that is trying to silence the voice of the church. So I'm supposed to speak to it, but speak what? I get sidetracked about the lyrics I quoted earlier from Never Lost. I check online to make sure I'm singing the right words. One of Michelle's great complaints about my singing. I was surprised to find out that the lyrics should say, wind, listen to the sound, not we'll listen to the sound. Then it comes to me. The man in my dream, Dennis Erickson, the Miami Hurricanes football coach, was a spiritual hurricane. the hurricane coach from the 1980s. I know it's weird. Ephesians 2:2 calls the enemy the ruler of the kingdom of the air. So I'm going to speak to the wind and the ruler of the kingdom of the air. And I speak to the wind that night, peace be still. I speak to the wind, no weapon formed against your church. And I began in September, I began to speak to that wind that was in my room. I said, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. I began to speak to the wind that in this dark hour, the church and myself, I'll grow stronger physically and spiritually. I began to speak to that spirit that was in my room, that this voice will not be silent. What the enemy is meant for destruction, God is going to do something great. You may roar, but Jesus has never lost a battle. And that spirit was gone in a second. Because I had power. I had power because I waited on it. Because back in March, when I was fine and I was healthy, when the Lord woke me up and I wanted to go back to sleep, or I wanted to go eat on Sunday afternoon at 12:26, I didn't do what my body wanted to do. I waited. And because I waited when I needed the power, it was there. I'm going to ask you to stand. And for the next, 5-10 minutes, we're going to worship. We're going to wait. And then we're going to ask you to respond to the word this morning. But as we worship, as Lane said in his prophetic word this morning, and as April's told me earlier, the saints this morning, there's a holiness, there's a power. If you'll just look to the Lord as we worship, your deliverance is coming. It's already been sent. But you got to wait for it.